I was doing this technique on a patient, and I was working on it, and she's like, "What are you doing? Like, it looks like you're doing nothing." I was like, and I said that. I was like, "No, this really works. I'm not just pulling your leg." And she thought it was so funny that she put it on a mug for me, so it's on my desk on a mug. So I thought it was gonna go over well, but it didn't land. All right, fine. No more jokes for you guys.
It's lunchtime.
It's lunchtime. It's after 3 is when you guys don't like my jokes. All right, so long axis distraction. You're going to bring in slight degree of flexion and abduction, so about 20 degrees. Okay, and then you're just going to do a long axis distraction. You're going to pull on the leg. Now, if the pelvis starts to move, or if they start to slide down the leg, you're way past the capsular barrier of the hip. You're simply trying to take up the slack of the hip capsule.
You said 20 degrees flexion or
20 degrees flexion, 20 degrees abduction. Okay? So yeah, the table's a little high for me, so I'm going a little bit lower because body mechanics trumps the hip position. Yeah.
Would you ever provide compression for joint plates, like loose?
20 abduction.
Not for this technique. Like, you could do that for the directional glides, but this technique specifically is generally tensing the hip capsule. Okay? Yeah.
Does 20 degrees of flexion and 20 degrees of abduction put him into loose back position?
Yep. Yeah, so now he's in a position where I can get play in the hip to get a sense of what's happening at the capsule. Okay? So here I am, so I'm not going to use my elbow bend to try and do this because that's just going to take up too much energy. So I set myself in a staggered stance, and foot of preference, whichever you like. Back in neutral. I have my elbow slightly bent so I can add a little bit of pull from the elbow. And then I lean back and I'm getting a sense of the tension. I feel it nice and loose, and then I feel it start to stiffen up, and I get a sense, do I have a firm capsular end feel, or is it that really stiff, leathery feeling to it? Okay? Now, clearly you're close to hip extension when you're doing this, so you're getting a sense of the capsule close to hip extension. So you could use the short access technique, where you come in here. You can go you can get away with going this way if their knee can tolerate it. For this technique, it is better to go underneath the knee. You want to come up to the joint line, as close to the joint line as you can get. Okay, so I'm going to come to the crease of the hip here. Is that okay?
Yep.
So I'm on the crease of the hip. I have my hand there. I'm going for the knife edge of the hand right at the crease of the hip. So I abduct to expose the crease, and then I bring him back to neutral because I want him in neutral flexion. My other hand goes over to back up my hand. I bring him to flexion, and then I do the short axis caudal glide. So it's an inferior glide. Okay, but now he's in hip flexion. So I've taken up some of the hip slack, so now I can apply the caudal glide. Okay? Similar to what we have done at the other joints, you can do this kind of in their neutral zone. So you saw this in hip flexion, in hip extension. You saw this in partial hip flexion. Get a sense of the overall capsular play. But this is a great way to differentiate capsular versus muscular when someone has limited hip flexion. So if they have limited hip flexion, I get up to this point, I do my glute max test, and I'm like, ooh, that's about as far as it goes. And I'm like, it kind of feels like a firm, stiff end feel, like it's a capsular end feel or a leathery end feel that feels like a scarred over capsule. So now I want to really differentiate that. So I come in, I'm at their end range. So if the end range is because of capsular stiffness, what do I expect when I do the caudal glide? Okay, so well, let's say I get to this point and I can't go any further, and I'm like, that feels pretty stiff, but I'm not sure. But the reason he doesn't go any further than this is because of the glute max. So then I come in and I want to differentiate it. So I come in and I do my caudal glide, weight shift back. What do I expect here? Movement. So the differentiation here is at the end range of hip flexion, I want to know if it's muscular, articular, or dural. So I come in and I do an articular glide, a caudal glide. If it's articular, when I do that, I will feel that capsular not move because I've already taken up the slack. If the reason for the range of motion limitation is muscular, when I go in for the joint, there's plenty of play. The joint's like, I got more, I can do more, but the muscle's like, nope, we're not going anywhere. Okay? So try the long axis and the short axis glide.